American flag is the symbol of liberty. If you live in America, a place of liberty, we have this.
A place of liberty.
Ungrateful.
I'm Ben Shapiro.
Rather despicable distaste for our own freedom. We've gotten so used to being fat and lazy and rich and free that we seem to forget that there are people all over the planet who live like that. And that,
dude, what are you talking about?
For most of human
does he think that the majority of Americans are like Dennis Prager or something?
History, none of that was the rule. And meanwhile, you have, again, the sickening specter of Americans kneeling for the American flag while living in the richest and freest country in the history of the world. I promise you, Colin Kaepernick would not trade places with any one of these Cuban dissidents. I promise you, Ilhan Omar would not be trading places with any one of the people living in Hong Kong right now. None of these people ever are willing to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to ripping the United States and talking about how evil it is.
What are you talking about? Oh,
so there's a number of things to say. First of all,
just leave if you don't like it, forehead. Oh,
well, if you watch his entire segment, he doesn't mention the U.S. embargo on Cuba once. He doesn't mention it.
That's criminal, in my opinion. That's horrible. That's like reprehensible. To talk about the Cuban situation and not talk about the embargo is just straight up propagandizement.
And I have to say, anybody who's talking about the issue of Cuba and they don't bring up the embargo, they're either incredibly ignorant on the facts, or they're stupid, or they're lying to you for ideological reasons. Now, you could take your pick. I'm not going to say which of those things Ben Shapiro is, but you can determine for yourself which one you think is the most accurate. But it is incredibly dishonest to talk about what's happening in Cuba without bringing up the U.S. embargo. We have 240 sanctions on that country. The protests were very clear. There's a shortage of food. There's a shortage of medical supplies. They want more food. They want more medical supplies. If the U.S. lifts the embargo, that would instantly help the people of Cuba. It's not an opinion. That's a fact. So to not bring that up and to pretend like, oh no, it's all just they're protesting for freedom and democracy. That's your interpretation when they said up front, immediately, the very first thing was shortage of food and shortage of medical supplies. And by the way, Ben omits what? There are now pro-government protests.
Yeah, and there's people who are using footage of the pro-government demonstrations and saying that they're anti-government protests.
Just as big as the anti-government ones. But he omits that. So he's going to omit everything that doesn't
There's
fit.
also people who are using footage of people marching around, American citizens marching around in Miami as if they're in Cuba.
His narrative. That's what Ben Shapiro does. To not bring up the embargo is a crime. He did a whole segment on Cuba and didn't bring up the embargo. Now, let's get to all of his points here.
And there's literally people who are using footage of like other protests in other countries where you can see the flags of the other countries clearly in the videos, and they're like, oh, look at all these people in Cuba protesting the evil government. Oh.
He says, first, I want to trade the Americans who protest the flag for Cubans who don't. Think about what he's saying there. His point is, only Americans who agree with me, Ben Shapiro, count.
Wait a second. Moral nihilism just seems so obviously wrong to me that I have a hard time understanding how someone could unironically hold the position. Okay, then, let's debate about it.
So all this stuff that these guys like...
Put your money where your mouth is, dude.
...to say about intellectual diversity and tolerance of other ideas and
yeah,
open
it's all
dialogue
bullshit.
And free speech and free
Every single time
expression.
the IDW talks about free speech, they're lying to you. They don't care about it at all. None of these people give a fuck about that whatsoever.
Shit. He just told you, I would rather have ideological homogeneity than have ideological diversity.
Yeah.
That's what he just said.
When they say, "Oh, we want freedom of thought," they just mean that they don't want the way the winds are blowing to go too far left. They want it all to be like contained inside their own little conservative bubble.
The Americans who want to protest the flag, I'd rather have them out of the country and Cubans who love the American flag in the country. So you want people who ideologically are more aligned with you and the ones who don't agree with you to get out. And this is the other thing. You'll see this all the time with Ben. He strawmans his opponents, and he doesn't steelman them. So when somebody protests the U.S. flag, he just interprets that as, you hate America. And you're...
Yeah, Ben Shapiro's arguments in that clip were horrible. The ones that I caught when I came back, horrid.
un-American.
Oh, bro, I'm the philosopher. I'm the cool kid philosopher, guys. And I just make bad arguments constantly, and then I preach about logic and facts. But when he says logic and facts, he's just appealing to reactionary sentiments. Like, it's just logical, dude. Don't you know it? Oh, it's just logic.
And that's disrespectful. That's a straw man of their position.
Insanely fundamentalist. So you think it's logic.
Talk to people who've protested the U.S. flag. Talk to Colin Kaepernick, who he brings up derisively at the end.
Why can't you do it today? I'm live today. We could get in VC and debate about it right now.
He'll tell you exactly why he's doing it, and none of the reasons are, America's really bad and I don't like it. It's terrible. I'm against America. Nobody says that when they protest.
Why won't anyone debate me? Literally, last time I streamed, I spent 2 hours trying to find people to debate me.
Do you want to listen to...
No one wanted to.
...people's actual concerns and then respond to it? Or would you rather just pretend anybody who's not on my political team hates America by definition and wants to actively make America worse? Usually when people are protesting the flag, they have a broader point, and their whole point is, let's fix this issue to make America better. They're trying to improve America. But he doesn't even grant them that...
Yeah, they preach about free speech, and then the second anyone protests, like, you blasphemizing the flag or anything like that, they lose their fucking minds. They lose their fucking shit. Whoa, horrible sacrilege. You belong in a cage, like.
Basic proposition. He just smears them and strawmans them, and they're all bad people, and they all just hate America.
It's funny because if these people had, like, their way, America would be more anti-free expression than any of the authoritarian countries that they love to hate on, which aren't even the most authoritarian countries in the world, by the way, because those ones are allied with us, like Saudi Arabia and Israel. Like, those ones are all our friends.
It's so lazy, and I don't know how anybody watches that and thinks he's nailing it. Then he goes on to say, this I love because he pretends to be the facts over feelings guy. The American flag is the symbol of liberty. That's what he said. Ben, the American flag
Imagine saying
is the
that.
symbol of everything American. Everything America has done. That's what that flag represents. That's a fact. Your interpretation of it is an opinion. The American flag only represents liberty, or it represents liberty. Well, hold on now. If it represents everything America has done, it does represent the good thing.
Those are some pretty free drone strikes, aren't they? Aren't we generous to give all of these countries our free drone strikes? With our American flag? Symbol of liberty, Ben Shapiro?
But it also represents the bad things. So does it represent the Constitution and free speech?
Why can't I see my chat
and
on
the
my
New
phone?
Deal? Absolutely. It absolutely represents those things. And helping to defeat the Nazis? Absolutely. It represents all those wonderful things. You know what else it represents? Slavery, Jim Crow, Native American genocide, Japanese internment, nuking Japanese civilians, the Iraq War, torture, Abu Ghraib.
Yeah, we're literally the only country who's ever used nuclear bombs.
Goes on and on. Now, you might not like that, Ben.
Freedom!
But facts don't care about your feelings. I don't care if that triggers you. That's what the American flag is. It represents America. It represents the good and the bad. Again, I think that's obvious, but he wants to twist it in his conservative direction. Then he had the nerve to say, you know, people in this country, like Ilhan Omar, Colin Kaepernick, or people who protest the flag, they have a distaste for our own freedom.
I'm sorry about
Again,
that. That was
massive
gross.
straw man.
That was fucking disgusting.
Of course they would concede that certain freedoms we have are wonderful. But, you know what's not wonderful? NSA spying, torture, the drug war, locking up nonviolent drug offenders, ruining lives over nonviolent drug offenses. That's not freedom. You get locked up in a cage.
the American flag is the symbol of liberty, but we have mass incarceration on a scale that like no other country could dream of. Like
age because you sell a substance that slightly tweaks your consciousness? Nonsense. Or you've taken a substance that slightly tweaks your consciousness and you lose your life and your livelihood and you get locked up and it's all ruined? That's nonsense. Are we really free if we have millions of people who don't have health care? Are we really free if we have,
what?
The minimum wage isn't even a living wage. Millions of people work full time and they don't make enough money to survive. In what meaningful sense are we free in that scenario? In what meaningful way are we free? These are all issues that need to be addressed. Now, I'm not saying I hate America. I'm saying let's improve it by addressing these things. And the attack on Colin Kaepernick was just the worst because stop and think about it, guys. The Cubans who are protesting,
Ben Shapiro is still soy modeling over Colin Kaepernick. It's like
they said the reason why they're protesting, they need more food and they need more medical supplies. That's what they said. So the Cubans are protesting to improve Cuba.
Do I even want to click on this
Kaepernick
video
is protesting
right
to improve America. He said it. Hey, I want no more police killings, and I want to.
So a while back, there was this guy named Theodore Kaczynski.
now? Okay. That's better.
Fair justice system. I'm sure he wants to end the drug war
That's
and
a
free all
better
the nonviolent drug offenders, disproportionately targeted people of color. So Cubans are protesting to try to improve Cuba. Colin Kaepernick is protesting to try to improve America because this is his country. And Ben looks at that and says, the Cubans are freedom fighters and liberty lovers and they're wonderful, but Colin Kaepernick is an ungrateful loser who doesn't appreciate America enough or whatever the fuck. It's just so childish. It's so partisan. It's so pathetic. And again, if Ben really wanted to be consistent, he would talk about all the other countries that are our allies that have authoritarian repressive governments, and then there are people in the street protesting those governments.
But
he
they
doesn't
never talk
those.
about those things. They never talk about that at all. Because they're in favor of that. It's all, oh, we love America, yeah.
Because if any protesters are nominally left-wing, their concerns are, by definition, not legit. But if they're potentially right-wing, now everything they're fighting for is legit.
Not to mention, just talk about recent shit that's happened. Like, the fact that we almost installed our own puppet president and Trump just declared this fucking US-backed dude the president of Venezuela. like as if we can just decide, and the fact that there was a successful U.S.-backed coup in Bolivia, by the way, and the fascist who was in control of the country against the people's democratic will there for a year, a short time, she literally mowed down a bunch of indigenous protesters of her. But Ben Shapiro didn't say a peep about that one. He didn't say shit about that. Literally used her governmental power to kill protesters. Not even just you don't have as much political direct freedom, but literally we're gonna murder you if you protest. Which isn't happening in Cuba, by the way.
They're freedom fighters and they're great people, and we should trade Americans who are on the left with people overseas who are on the right. Let's make the trade. Because I'm Ben Shapiro and I love ideological diversity and freedom. I love freedom so much, I would ideally want to deport you if you don't agree with me about the American flag. I mean, the loopholes in his logic are legendary.
Yeah, he's just jumping hoops. Logic. It makes no sense.
The intellectual of the right. Intellectual, my ass cheeks.
Cool kids philosopher. Ben Shipster. All right. Let's watch more about the Cuba stuff. Go back to the playlist here. We did this one. Wasn't even the one I meant to look at. Okay, here's the footage of the Fox
So as
News
everybody
dude.
knows, there are protests going on in Cuba. What corporate media is not telling you is that there are also counter-protests going on in Cuba.
Yeah,
and they're also pretty large.
Yeah, and they're bigger, and there's people using footage of the pro-government demonstrations as if they are anti-government.
So I'm not going to get into too much on that front here, because that's not the purpose of this segment. But what I want to show you is the dominant narrative in the West and the dominant narrative on right-wing TV. So on Fox News...
Don't forget, it's not just right-wing TV, it's left-wing YouTube and Twitch who talk like that.
They're hyping up just the protests, not the counter-protests, but the protests. And they're pretending like the U.S. embargo of Cuba has nothing to do with why people are in the streets. Now, we know that's absurd because people are demanding more food and more medical supplies. That would absolutely be improved if the United States lifted our criminal embargo of Cuba. But they're pretending like that's not even a factor at all, and everybody who's out there in the streets wants to overthrow the government in Cuba and implement some sort of U.S.-style system. And, of course, they use the buzzwords freedom and democracy, as if, anytime we go toppling governments, that's really what we're concerned about. And as all you guys know, that's definitely not what we're concerned about. We don't have some sort of
it makes no sense at all.
Altruistic, principled crusade going on because we just want...
All of that ideological fluff around it's literally a way of getting like average people who aren't political to be like, oh yeah, I'm in favor of this because I enjoy those things. I like the ideas and concepts abstractly of freedom and democracy and so on and blah blah blah. I feel as though that constitutes something that I find important about my way of life, you know what I mean? So why not? Why not? If that's what the American military stands for, if they really do stand for my freedom, then sure, they must be doing something benevolent on the world stage, yeah. But that's not actually the reason why they do what they do. That's not actually the reason why people start wars. Like, it's meaningless when you put it in an actual global world historical material, like, level. The abstract concepts of freedom become meaningless because that's not what it's actually about. It's about resource control and profit and finance capital. That's how imperialism started.
People to have more freedom and democracy. If that was the case, Saudi Arabia wouldn't be our top ally, Israel wouldn't be our top ally, and we'd have a better track record. And
it's about control. It's about hegemony, like Vosh is in favor of. Vosh wants American control of the world, the globe, the world market.
Instead of what we do have, which is propping up of dictators, we'd have thriving democracies. Anyway, I digress. Here's the mayor of Miami on Fox News, casually floating potential airstrikes of Cuba.
Oppressive government and a cruel U.S. embargo. They deserve policies that empower them and help them improve their lives. Do you think that President Biden, looking at this situation, will lift that embargo? And do you think that's what he should do?
No, I don't think the embargo is cruel at all. And I think that the Cuban people are not asking for a lifting of the embargo. They're going out on the streets.
Yes, they are. They are, by the way. This guy just gets up here and lies through his teeth on TV to thousands of people. Of course they don't want the embargo, bro. What are you talking about?
Every single day talking about the failure of the communist regime to provide for its people. And I don't understand why that's so difficult for people to understand.
How are they supposed to provide for their people when you have 240 sanctions on the fucking country? And you're the richest country in the world. Don't you think you could help them? If you didn't fucking block off trade with them, you fucking moron, you cretin, you fucking disgusting piece of shit. I swear to God.
It has failed for 6 decades. And what should be being contemplated right now is a coalition of potential military action in Cuba, similar to what has happened in both.
Yeah, if we invade and airstrike and bomb them and destroy, literally materially destroy their infrastructure, yeah, that'll help them. That'll help them for sure. Even though what the people want is food and medicine. Why don't you just get them that? Instead of being like, oh, it's their evil government. We have to bomb them. Oh, yes. No, dude.
administration.
It's incoherent. And honestly, I think most people watching this can see through this, because this is bullshit. All you need is your common sense and your human empathy to see through these kinds of fucking narratives. It makes no sense at all. It literally contradicts itself. Their worldview contradicts itself, because it's not supposed to make sense. It's not like BreadTube thinks the world works, where it's like, oh, my individual rational brain making decisions that's how shit happens. That's how the world is the way it is. No, dude, it doesn't make sense like that. It's a Machiavellian power game. You have to understand it on that level. You have to understand the fact that these people on TV, these elected officials, these politicians, won't tell you the truth about other countries and our conflicts and our relations with them. They won't tell you the truth about that. They're there to spin a narrative for more aggression and more domination of the globe. That's their job. That's what they do. They're literally running the structures. They're literally cogs and gears in the machine. That's literally their purpose. That's what this guy is there to do. It's obvious. Like, I shouldn't have to be explaining this, but I feel like I have to explain this because you have people who consider themselves leftists and people who consider themselves socialists now saying that they're in favor of this kind of thing. And that's the purpose of the stream. That's the purpose of the stream today, is to argue against those people. Because I never thought I would be in the position where I have to argue against leftists, so-called, on the issue of war and the American military-industrial complex. It makes no sense to me. I never thought I would be in that position, but here I am, thanks to Vosh. Thanks to Vosh.
In both Republican and Democrat administrations. In Republican with Bush in Panama, they deposed Noriega, and that country had peaceful democracy for decades. And you had interventions by Democratic presidents, taking out Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. It's a sovereign country where they took out a terrorist that probably saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives. And President Clinton in Kosovo, intervening in a humanitarian issue.
Shut up, dude.
With airstrikes. So there have been many, many opportunities.
How can you breathe the words humanitarian and airstrike in the same sentence and not sense your irony at all?
In the history
Are you suggesting airstrikes in Cuba?
What I'm suggesting is that option is one that has to be explored and cannot be...
It's an option that has to be explored. Fuck you, dude.
Just simply discarded as an option that is not on the table.
No one wants that.
And there's a variety of ways...
No one wants that besides these elites. No one wants that.
The military can do it, but that's something that needs to be discussed and needs to be looked at as a potential option, in addition to a variety of other options that can be discussed.
Absolutely mental.
Just on TV
Absolutely
saying
mental.
that. Just on TV
Under
saying that.
what authority would we be able to airstrike Cuba? I mean, the idea is, in order for us to strike without congressional approval, you would need a direct, imminent threat of violence, an attack against the U.S. homeland. That is...
But he wants it to be an option on the table. Like,
obviously not happening. Nobody's even pretending that's happening, because that would be the most absurd thing anybody said in human history. So if there's not a direct threat of violence against the United States of America, and there's not, under what authority are you going to have Biden and the executive branch and the government or our intelligence agencies just, hey, we're just going to go bomb Cuba? What? What? I mean, are they actually going to make the argument that...
Why is no one here for this stream? There's one viewer. What the fuck?
It's part of the war on terror or something. Did I miss
Where
something?
are you people?
Is Al-Qaeda running the Cuban government? I must have missed that. Is it
I should have
jihadists over
30 people in here by now. There's one person, it says.
there? Is it the people who attacked us on 9/11? Was it radical Cuban terrorism? What are you talking about? And if you want it to go through the House and the Senate, I got news for you. As insane and corrupt as the House and the Senate are, that shit is not getting through the House or the Senate. Are you out of your mind? But he's just casually floating it. He doesn't talk about under what authority we would do it. And he also doesn't mention, there's this underlying assumption here, like, well, obviously we need to be the savior. We need to be the world police. We're so benevolent and altruistic, and all we care about is freedom and democracy, and that's why we need to go do it. We need to go help these people and liberate these people. What about liberating the people of Saudi Arabia? They're one of our top allies. Yeah. And they behead people in the street for drug smuggling and apostasy. Are you kidding me? Women have no rights. And you want us to be concerned about what's going on in Cuba as opposed to an area where we actually might be able to have some influence, like with Saudi Arabia. Now, I'm not saying you bomb Saudi Arabia. That's insane. But what I am saying is internal talks, some sort of pressure, some sort of, economic nudging in the right direction. No. But when it comes to Cuba, he's like, I don't understand. Bomb it. What's the problem? This needs to be in the conversation. This needs to be on the table.
It's because they're a geopolitical enemy. They don't care about freedom and democracy when it comes to who they make friends or enemies with. That's not what it's actually about. You just have to look at the countries that are our allies to see that. Like, Saudi Arabia is the fucking perfect example of that. Makes no sense.
Psychotic do you have to be to believe that? And then he thinks he's bringing up all these instances of, like, U.S. successes in regime change or interventions. And number one, he's wrong in that he thinks all the things he cited are, evidence in his favor. It's not. But number two, he didn't mention Libya, failed state with slave markets, objectively worse off now than it was before we bombed. He didn't mention Syria.
Yeah.
Which is a colossal mess. The U.S.
And Vosh is in favor of U.S. intervention in Syria, too, by the way.
is occupying a third of the country, waging a dirty war, stealing the oil. Jihadist elements control other aspects of the country, and then you have a smaller portion of the country, which is effectively the Syrian government and Assad. He doesn't mention Iraq 2.0 with, okay, we got rid of Saddam Hussein, and then it was a colossal mess and hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians died, and we reignited a civil war and sectarian and ethnic flames of conflict. He doesn't mention our history in Latin America.
Yeah, he doesn't mention Pinochet in Chile at all.
What are you talking?
I wonder why he didn't mention that. I wonder why he didn't talk about Bolivia. I wonder why he didn't talk about Venezuela. It's because they failed. They literally... They tried the coup and they failed. They lost. And they lost Peru, too. They lost.
I think our interventions in Latin America during the Cold War were
The world is changing. The world is changing, folks. The world is changing.
We obliterated many of these countries. We propped up dictators, and there were, death squads, and there was torture. On what planet do you think that this is a good thing? But he casually brings it up as if it's a positive. He compares bombing the Cuban government as if it's like bombing bin Laden. I mean...
Also, I don't know if Kyle knows this, but there's already changes happening in the Cuban Communist Party. They're already evolving, and there's already, just let them handle their business. Let them handle their business. It's their government. It's not ours.
That was one of the most ridiculous Fox clips I've ever seen, and obviously that says a lot, because Fox is wall-to-wall insanity. But he even has the nerve to say at the beginning, no, I don't think the embargo is cruel, and I don't think this has anything to do with the embargo. The original reports, the protests are about, hey man, we need more food and we need more medical supplies.
It's literally people starving and sick. It's literally
We're kind of light
people
on that, and we can't
who are starving
take it anymore.
and sick. And he's like, oh, it has nothing to do with the embargo at all.
That is directly linked to the embargo. It's obviously linked to the embargo. Who are you kidding? But he acts like, no, they don't. They actually like the embargo. They just want to overthrow.
He said it's unrelated and they don't want to get rid of it.
For the government. Are you kidding? If you overthrow the government and you still have the embargo in place, they'd be in a similar position. They'd be in a very similar position. Now, I'm not defending every action of the Cuban government. Of course not.
My stream
I mean, we can have a conversation and go point for point and policy for policy as to what they're doing wrong domestically. More than willing to have that conversation. But to pretend like the embargo has nothing to do with it is the most dishonest thing I've ever heard in my life. Of course it has something to do with it. It absolutely has something to do with it, if not most of it. But this is what we wanted. We wanted to basically starve the Cuban people and then hope that makes them pissed enough to not understand we're at least in part responsible, and so they try to overthrow their own government.
Yeah.
That's what we wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a classic U.S. action. And it's so disingenuous to pretend, as virtually all elected officials in the U.S. are, except a handful, that no, I mean, we care so deeply about the Cubans, but we're in no position to do anything about this except maybe bomb or invade. Jen Psaki said, an invasion of Cuba is not off the table. An invasion of Cuba? So we're talking maybe airstrikes or boots on the ground.
They
Has
want
everybody
war.
lost-
They want war. And these are the progressives, quote. This is the harm reduction, quote unquote. It's the same establishment, dude. It's the same imperialist establishment. They
Their
want
mind?
war. They want war. They haven't lost their minds. They just want war.
This is lunacy. If you actually cared about helping the Cuban people, all you have to do is lift the sanctions.
Yeah.
That's it. There's over 200 sanctions that Trump put on. To Obama's credit, one of the best things he did was normalize relations with Cuba and lift the embargo. I gave him credit for that at the time. I'm giving him credit for it now, and I'll continue to give him credit for it. In the same way I'll give him credit for the Iran deal. These are some of the best things he did. Biden gets in there, and he keeps the Trump sanctions in place, keeps the embargo there. Why would you do that? Obama was right, Trump is wrong. I thought you were going to bring us back to the Obama years. Why would you do that? I guess on this issue, he happens to agree more with Trump than he does with Obama. But he's wrong. The fact of the matter is, guys, don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. You go read the history of it. Look at the history of Cuba. Look at what happened before you had Castro in the revolution.
Yeah,
The
look at
idea that, like,
Batista.
this right-wing puppet dictator to U.S. interests, Batista.
Tell me
the
that's
idea that he was
not-
like a lovely person.
Tell me that wasn't an improvement from Batista to Castro, and you'd be wrong.
And then Cuba was living, free. That's preposterous. Of course that's not the case. There was a revolution because he was a right-wing dictator who was incredibly exploitative, and he allowed the U.S. to exploit Cuba.
Yeah.
Basically, like Cuba was like a peasant state to the U.S.
These people,
US
these pro-imperialist, pro-interventionist people would want that again. They would want that part too. They want like a second Batista government where Cuba is just a little backyard casino for rich Americans to go, while the actual people who were indigenous to the area just starve and go hungry and die. That's what they would want. That's what they would prefer to the revolutionary government. I say no, you have to uphold the revolution because we live in a world with real powers that be, and with these geopolitical conflicts, you have to pick a side. It's not enough to just say all states are bad blanketly in this idealistic principle fashion. You have to actually look at the situation and decide, oh, okay, I'd rather support the anti-imperialists than the imperialists. Simply because I have that level of fucking... First of all, Leninist proletarian internationalism. Secondly, human empathy.
Trish ran it. So what happened is there was a revolution, and you had the oil industry in 1960 was nationalized by the Cubans. And so before it was, U.S. corporations were benefiting from Cuban oil. And then the Cuban people took it over and nationalized it. So that's the thing that the U.S. viewed as unforgivable.
And that's the case for all of these places, like Iraq, like Syria, like Libya, what happened in Libya. All of these places, when they nationalize their oil industries and they decide, hey, we want to control our resources, this global market, this globalized capitalist market, this finance capitalist market isn't working out for us. We're going to take control. These progressive, revolutionary, radical movements that take control of these countries, and then the U.S. empire goes, nope, you can't control your own country. Nope, we need those resources. Oh, we got to make profit off those resources, folks. So we invade, we install our puppet governments, and we bomb hundreds of thousands of people. Fields of corpses, as Vosh would say. It's the product of American imperialism. It's not the product of ending American imperialism. That makes no sense. That makes no sense, Vosh. I'm still angry about the Vosh clip. I'm still mad about the Vosh clip. Makes no sense at all. I'm just trying to drive these points home tonight because that's the theme of the whole stream. It's one long stream against regime change. It's one long proletarian internationalism stream because I'm sick and tired of hearing people who identify as leftists make pro-imperialist arguments. Makes no sense at all. Makes no sense whatsoever. We forgot our memory. We forgot our history. We don't know. We don't know what's going on. It makes no sense. It's disgusting. It's horrible. And I'm here to set the record straight, as always. Because I'm based. I'm based. I'm the based one.
Not too dissimilar. Remember this? In the 1950s, in Iran, they elected a left-wing leader.
I don't trust the American left. They love wars now. Yes. I never thought it would be the case, but it's true. Thanks to Vosh and Destiny and Dylan Burns and all the fucking before BreadTube, this wasn't the case. There was no one on the online left who were making these fucking arguments. Oh, we gotta stay in Afghanistan. Dude, you want to see a field of corpses? Look at Afghanistan. Last 5 years, 200,000 people dying.
Mohammad Mossadegh, democratically elected leader, he wanted to nationalize the oil, and it was the U.S. and the U.K. that basically were exploiting and stealing the oil.
The boomer leftists are more based. The old heads are more based. Vosh and Zanderhall are losers, honestly. They're collapsing.
And
they have no ground to stand on, and they just toe the line of the establishment completely now. It makes no sense.
And they said, not going to let that happen. And so the CIA overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh, and we put the Shah into power to be a dictator in Iran. And then eventually, in the 1970s, late 1970s, we had the Islamic Revolution, and they overthrew the Shah. So,
and people like to say, oh, it's not about oil. It's not. Of course, it's about oil, mostly, partially. Like, you can't just say, oh, it's ideology. Like, no, that's not the driving force behind these things.
I mean, the history of this stuff is crystal clear. Like, you can go read it. Don't take my word for it.
I hate when people will take, because these kind of takes fly in university settings. I hate when people will take the fucking ideological, like, idealist position and then just be like, oh yes, whatever the justification that was given for the quote unquote real reason for why they're doing this, that's really why they're doing it, guys. We just have to take them at their face value word. No, we don't. It's fucking politics, dude. You have to look beyond the appearances. You have to look below the surface and see what the fuck is actually going on. It's politics. You have to think politically.
And you'll see exactly what was going on here. You'll see what our real concerns are. Our concerns are U.S. corporate interests. Our concerns are stealing natural resources. Our concerns are trying to gain a subservient puppet state. That's our concern. Our concern is the oil. That's our concern. This idea that we care about freedom or democracy or we got to liberate the people. If you believe that, you're 9 years old. And clearly on right-wing TV and politicians of both parties are 9 years old because they can't see through this and they're making a lot of these dumb arguments. It really drives me crazy.
And breadtubers are making these dumb arguments.
We need to have a media that's honest about this stuff, and they're not.
And fear-mongering. Oh, China, so are you. Oh, there'll be Chinese vassal states. Why would that be any fucking worse than them being U.S. vassal states, Bosh?
And the fact that a loudmouth YouTuber like myself is one of the few places where you can go where we even talk about the fucking embargo. It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling, but that's where we are.
Apparently that's what socialism is now. Apparently that's what socialism is now. People say, oh, Stalin gave communism a bad name. Vosh gave socialism a bad name.